So, conscious dreaming, I don't know if that's a thing, but it's a thing for me. Have you ever wondered how a romance author come up with a story, how they go from one idea into their head all the way onto the page? Hi, my name is CJ Lucci. I'm a mafia romance author, and in today's videos, I'm going to talk about my process from one idea all the way to a book. I want to thank Noah, who is a member of my Facebook reader group and who thought about this question because she wanted to know what's my process, how do I work out any characters, and how do I work out a plot. And yes, I do have a Facebook reading group. I share all of my process. I share all of the news about my books, any special edition coming up, any character art, especially, and anything that you might want to know that's not in my newsletter or in my social media. You can subscribe with the link down below. So how do I come up with a idea for a book? It all starts usually with one scene. I'm going to be thinking about a scene that I really want to write, and from that scene, characters are gonna be born. From those characters and that scene, it can't be all of that and all there is to that book. So then I start creating a plot, I start creating a backstory for those characters, and finally I end up with a manuscript. After the first manuscript is done, there are what is called self-edits. That's when I edit the book myself. I have a look at the plot. Is there any plot holes somewhere? Is there any plot holes not only in the plot itself, but in the characters? Then I send it to my developmental editor who is helping me understand where did I miss anything. After that, I do another round of edits with the comments of my developmental editor. After that, there is what is called a line edit or copy edit. Sometimes it's both together. And then that's when I really look line by line. Are the words making sense? Do I want to change anything? Is it flowing nicely? And finally, arc and distribution. So, my writing process, I think, is pretty similar to a lot of people. It's kind of looking like a funnel. So, for example, if we take Forbidden Fruit, which is my contemporary romance. This is mafia adjacent because the male main character is the accountant of the mafia, but it doesn't have any like really mafia element and darker element. As you can see per the color, it's more light-hearted and it has characters that are more in a contemporary setting. So for this book, my idea was I want to write about a single dad. My brother last year went through a really nasty divorce, and my way of processing it was to write. So I decided, okay, I'm going to write a single dad and I'm going to give that single dad a happy ever after. And no, the character is not inspired by my brother. This is where the similarities end. This book is also an age gap. It's a single dad nanny romance. So once I had that idea of I want to write a single dad romance, that was literally just the idea in my head. I started thinking about the characters. Who are they? What are their names? What are their age? I actually have a character sheet that I'm going to be putting right here when I figure out how to edit. The character sheet is it's a great tool to help me understand and have a well-rounded character. So here you can see there are like the basics, the age, ethnicity, if there is one, where do they live, do they have children, what do they look like? And then there is the more psychological part of the character, which is where the character is going to be turning more into a well-rounded figure than just a one-dimensional or two-dimensional character. So I establish what are their dreams, what are their goals, what are their motivations, what are their qualities, and their strengths and weaknesses, not only the one that they are aware of, but the one that they are unaware of and that are still showing up in the book. Because basically what I want is the reader to understand that my characters are unreliable narrators. They are telling things about themselves. They are telling things about the story from how they perceive it. And how do I know that? Because I create them with also major life events that made them a certain way or that impacted their life. So, for example, here it's not complete because it's a new sheet that I'm using now. But Vanessa, the female main character, the love interest in Forbidden Fruit, had her mother pass away. And that really impacted who she is as a person, how she views life. Lino, the male main character, is went through a divorce. So how does that impact the way he sees himself, the way he sees love? And those character sheets and those questions help me really make the characters who they are. Those are for the two main characters that I mentioned, but there are other characters in the book. So I also have a smaller character sheet for them, depending if I want them to be like a fully secondary character or just someone who makes an appearance to further the plot. Now that the backstory and the characters are established, I go on with the plot. I am half a plotter, half a pantser. If you've never heard those terms, plotting means that you literally write down everything that you want to happen in your book. Pantser are the writers that, I think the expression is, write on the seat of their pants. I think that's the English expression. And it means they just kind of wing it. They know their characters well, don't get me wrong on that, but they don't have such a structured and determined way of working with their story. For me, I do a little bit of both. So, same thing as the character sheet, I have a whiteboard that is simply on Canva. I'm using a Canva template, and I divide the book into 3-act. I work with the 3-act structure. It's usually a lot used in romance, and it's easier to give your story a beat. Giving your story a beat is essential when you are a writer because you want the reader to keep being engaged. So I divide the book on 3 acts. First act ends at about 25% of the book. That's when something happens to make you engaged in the story. You have the midpoint, so half of the story. The first part is when the characters are kind of reacting to the action that are happening to them. And the second part is when they take action. After that, I also divide those 3 acts into smaller moments that are also called beats. And I have to always remember, because I write romance, to have romance beats. So the romance story are also happening in coded moment, let's say, and then the plot itself is also coded. So for the plot, I use a 8-part structure. So I divide my book in 3, and then I divide it in 8 smaller parts. And for the romance part, there is what is called a book that is called Romancing the Beats, and I use that as my base. However, I mostly write no third act breakup books. So in the book Romancing the Beats, one part of the beat is the third act breakup. So why do they break up? And then they reconciliate, and you have your happily ever after. I don't use that traditional beat because I don't do third act breakup. But there is still a need for the conflict to be an important part and to really move the story along. You are like culminating towards 80%, and then you have your resolution from 80 to 90% of the book, sometimes from 70 to 90% of the book. There is that conflict, that resolution, and then the last 10% are when they are happy, which is the part I really hate writing because I love drama. So again, I'm using here the example of Forbidden Fruit, where I've put most of the beats of the story on page, but literally I winged it. I was much more a pantser for this book than I am for my mafia romances, because for the mafia romance there is a lot of plot happening, and this book was more of a character-driven book. I spent a lot more time plotting mafia romance than I spent time plotting this contemporary romance, meaning I just write, and when I write, ideas come to me. So this is where you hear a lot of romance author and author in general say that you let the characters speak, you let the characters talk. That's what I did with that book, and that's what I do with every single one of my book. The characters are going to drive the story and are going to tell me where to go. So when I start writing, I write chronologically. So I start at the first scene of the first book and I go along chronologically, which is not the case for everyone, but that's how it works for me. So when I started writing Forbidden Fruit, they have this sort of meet cute, except he doesn't trust her. And she is thinking that he's not a very good person and a nice person. And I thought this would be more of a fast burn, and it ended up being a slow burn. And I really enjoyed writing that. But for someone like me who loves to write insta lust and insta love, this book was completely driven by the characters. And they were like, no, bitch, we are not insta love, insta lust. We are insta attraction and we are going to refuse it. And then there will be a fuck it moment. And that's how the characters were speaking to me. So as I write, ideas come to my mind. Creativity breeds creativity. So usually I do what is called a writing sprint. So for the writing sprint, I set up about 20 to 30 minutes, no distraction, no phone, no nothing. I have a Discord with other authors, and we sometimes meet, and we also have a channel for a solo sprint. I click on that thing and let the time fly as I write. That helps me not question myself, not doubt myself. I just write, and the characters are going to take the story forward. If I need to change anything, I have self edits and I have developmental edits to go through to do exactly that. So the sprint have been extremely helpful. I've only started doing them in December 2023, so about a year plus a few months ago, thanks to that Discord that really motivated me. And now that's how I do. I try to write at least 2 sprints every day or every other day. And that's how I was able to write 4 books last year. And I have a goal of 4 books for this year. Because I write only 1,500 words, or about 1,500 words per day, I don't get too overwhelmed with really big targets. And it's easier for me to just move on with the story and just move on with the next scene. I also am someone who is not able to work on multiple projects at the same time. So once I have started writing a story, I have to keep writing it. I have to end it to be able to go to the story after. And sometimes there is that shiny story that you want to start writing. For me, I cannot start that unless I have finished the story prior. So, for example, right now I'm writing a novella for a bi plus anthology that I'm working on with 10 other bi plus authors. And I am a little stuck because there is this other story, that MMF mafia romance, that I want to write, but I cannot start it unless I have finished my novella. Otherwise, I'm going to be delayed and my head is going to go all directions. There is one thing that I do consistently to help move my characters and move my plot along that I haven't heard anyone say before. So this will stay a secret between us. I dream of my character, but I purposefully dream of my character. So what does that mean? I go to bed thinking about a scene that I want to write. And at the moment where you're just in between that consciousness and deep sleep, I am able to stir the dream, the direction that my brain wants to go or my consciousness wants to go without the brain interfering. Meaning that when I dream and I'm kind of still awake, I'm not conscious, so I'm not intellectualizing the story. I'm letting the creative mind do the work for me. And either I get up write down half asleep and then go back to bed and actually sleep. Or sometimes I do that multiple days in a row until the story sticks so much to my brain that I'm able to wake up, get to my computer, and write it. So, conscious dreaming, I don't know if that's a thing, but it's a thing for me and it's been working wonders. For example, when I was doing I Love Beauty, my debut novel, there was this scene, I think it's in chapter 4, when the female main character and male main character meet. They meet at a bar, and I knew exactly that scene, but I was a little stuck on where to go from there. So I went to bed, I think for 2 weeks straight, thinking about that scene. And this would be the last thing I think of when I go to bed and I get into the deep sleep. Worked wonders because right after I would wake up and think about what I dreamt about. And then I wrote the rest of the book. So, yeah, conscious dreaming. Don't know if that's a thing, but it's working. Now, with all the work done on the characters, with all the plotting done, with all the sprints, the conscious dreaming, I have my manuscript. What do I do now? I do the self edits, which means I just send the document to my Kindle and literally read my book on my Kindle. Just noticing how it feels as a reader is helpful to notice the small things that I wouldn't notice if I were just going to go on my computer and open my Word document. From that, I only look at plot and character. Did I talk about something that the character was doing and then forgot about it? Do they have a distinct thing that they do that I only mention one time? Are they wearing the same clothes in two different scenes, or do they even have clothes? Did I forget to remove clothes and smuts? Those type of things. It seems like details, but at the end of the day, that's also what makes the reader drop out. So I really focus on those plot holes in the story, in the character, in the flow. And then once I'm satisfied with the second draft or third draft, I send it to my developmental editor. And the developmental editor will look at it from a perspective of an objective mind, not only as a reader, but also as a professional, looking where I've missed some of the points of my story, where plot holes happen. And they also give recommendations on how to take the plot further, how to make the characters more well rounded. They ask deeper questions that once you are in your story, you might forget or you might not think about. I really love the developmental edit feedback. I've done it for all of my books except the novella Bullets and Mistletoe, and it's been really helpful. Once I get their feedback, first of all, I love when they leave a little comments with hearts and love this and quote and give me more. That's really encouraging. Then I go for the developmental edits that I do myself. So I take into consideration most of the recommendations from the editor and I apply them to the document, to the manuscript. After that, once that's done and I'm satisfied with it, I go over line and copy editing. So, line by line, what do I need to change? Is this scene making sense? Is this flowing correctly? Did I miss a dialogue tag? Things like that. It takes quite a bit of time to do that, but it's also an enjoyable process, I feel. That's where you really refine your story and you refine your writing. And that's all for today. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I always love to answer readers' comments or authors' comments. How do you work? Do you work similarly? Do you want me to talk more about conscious dreaming or things like that? And if you're interested in my content, subscribe and I will see you in the next video. Bye.